This is Dom Bettinelli, the CEO of SQPN, with a brief but very important message. For more than a decade, SQPN has produced the Catholic faith and pop culture podcasts that you love. We're a nonprofit organization, so it's only your generosity that lets us carry out our mission. We haven't run a fundraiser in 2 years, and that's why we need to ask for your help right now. Please make a pledge of whatever amount you can afford to help us continue providing your favorite podcasts, as well as exciting new ones we have planned. To make your pledge and find out about the free thank you gifts we'd like to send you, visit sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give. Thank you for your generosity. May we hear from you today? You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode number 101.
Don't be scared. All of this is new to you and new can be scary. When people need help, I never refuse. There's this moment when you're sure you're about to die, and then you're born. I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor. Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who, including whether I should say 101 or 101. We can talk about that later.
Let's not.
But today we're discussing the newest episode, The Witchfinders. And joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going?
Great. So right off the bat, folks, remember to like Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook on our Facebook page. Retweet the shows on Twitter. Leave us comments. Subscribe in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. Tune in your favorite podcast app or YouTube, where if you subscribe there, hit the bell to make sure that you get notifications whenever we post a new episode. And above all, share the podcast with your friends to help us grow our community and reach more listeners. Now, folks, as you receive this is Monday. We're recording this and releasing it on Monday, January 26th, 2018. And tomorrow is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, which has become one of those new holidays after Black Friday, Cyber Monday. It is Giving Tuesday. And that means that we are entering the season of giving, which is Christmas time. And we are, as you know, running our giving campaign in which we seek your support to continue our work, bringing you these podcasts, which explore the intersection of faith and pop culture. And certainly today we're going to be exploring the intersection of faith and Doctor
culture.
Who. Yes, pop culture, this Doctor Who episode. But if you want to continue to hear not just the Secrets of Doctor Who, but all of the shows that we do, and to support them, because frankly, we're reaching lots of people with this. And we've heard over the years, the past decade, people say, I wasn't even a Christian when I started listening to your podcasts. But I started listening because they were interesting, all on their own, without having to be shove it down your throat, the Christian faith, and it got me curious and interested, and I explored more, and I started listening to some of your other podcasts, and there's some of those people who are now Catholic today, and so what we're doing is, I mean, it's not just a secret campaign to evangelize the unevangelized. We really do enjoy talking about this stuff. But we also do it with a mission, which is to reach people with discussion of that is wholesome, that's enlightening, that's educational, informative, and fun. I think we have a lot of fun. So
and it will show them that people of faith can be interested in culture and fun and can have interesting insights, and hopefully that may open some doors.
Exactly. So if you want to continue, if you want to support what we're doing and help us continue what we're doing, we really ask you, we're begging you, in fact, to support us by going to sqpn.com/give. We're more than a month into our giving campaign for this year, and to be quite honest, it's not going as well as I'd hoped. We're falling short of our goals, and we've still got a month left in this. We're going to the end of the year. And we really would love to have your support. If you are thinking about supporting SQPN, please don't wait. Please do it right away. Help us to ensure that we're going to be able to continue to do this well into the new year. All these great podcasts, not just Doctor Who, The Secrets of Star Trek, Jimmy Aiken's Mysterious World, and other podcasts that we're developing right now. New podcasts that you're going to love.
And even if you're not listening to this on Giving Tuesday, even if you're listening to it later, and even if you're listening after the Giving campaign, you can still support SQPN. We still need your assistance because we won't be able to continue producing all the podcasts we are if we're not able to meet our goals. So we've already had to cut back, and we'll have to cut back further if we don't reach our goals. So please do go to sqpn.com/give and become one of our regular monthly Patreon supporters. We have some special thank yous that we'd like to send you for your support. But it is really important that we hear from you either on Giving Tuesday or in the near future.
Yep. And I got a little extra I want to bring up at the end because I want to get right into this episode now. But another way that you can help us without having to spend an extra dollar that you weren't already going to spend. Stay tuned for that. But first,
spoiler warning: Amazon smile.
Exactly. But there is some news. In addition to today's episode, there is some Doctor Who news, some very interesting news, and a number of you listeners sent it in to us via email and Facebook and various other ways, and we greatly appreciate you sending that to us. But it's the big news that Tom Baker, the Fourth Doctor, has written a Doctor Who novel that's about to come out. Jimmy, what do you know about this? It was a movie that he had proposed, a script proposal that he made that never got made, but now he's turned it into a book. What do you know about it?
Yeah, so over the years, and even back during Tom Baker's day, there was a desire to bring Doctor Who to the big screen, and in recent years, that's actually happened with some crossover kind of big event things like the Day of the Doctor and so forth. But there was a desire to try to do a movie in the past, and it's surfaced in various forms over the years. Tom Baker was one of the people who pitched a proposal for it, and it didn't get made. One version of it was called Doctor Who in the Dark Dimension. This version is, and the title of the novel is The Scratch Man, and it's set during the Fourth Doctor's time, as you would expect from being written by Tom Baker. It also features his companions Sarah Jane Smith and Harry Sullivan. So it's actually set during his first season as the Doctor, because Harry didn't, it was a very good companion, but got written out fairly quickly. And in the series, in the novel, Doctor Who is confronted by a new villain known as the Scratch Man. And if you're familiar with some older British slang, scratch is, or old scratch is a term for the devil. And so this is another version of Doctor Who versus the devil, which is ironic given the episode we're going to be talking about today.
Exactly.
That's right. As I've heard this, the story of this novel described as kind of bonkers, including a grand scene.
Climactic scene with Harry and the Doctor and Sarah Jane trapped on a giant cosmic pinball machine.
That's kind of wild. So we'll look forward to that.
Forget playing chess against the devil. You'll play the play pinball against him.
Or
Bill and Ted did Battleship with death. So
right,
yep.
and the devil did go down to Georgia and play the violin with Charlie Daniels. So this is when is it coming out? In January.
January.
Yeah. So
and there's going to be an audiobook read by Tom Baker.
Yeah. How could you not get that version? I mean, come on.
Yeah,
I know, right?
The Doctor is back. For many of us, he is the Doctor. So, good. All right, excellent. So that brings us into today's episode, which features the 13th Doctor, played by Jodie Whittaker, and the usual companions, visiting 17th century Lancashire and England. Now, I have to say right off the bat that I'm kind of surprised at the timing of the release of this episode, that they chose to have this late in November as opposed to at Halloween. I mean, it just seems like a natural Halloween episode. But they run into witchcraft trials, witchcraft hysteria, and
by the way, even though they're in the 17th century, they're aiming for the 16th because they're hoping to go to the coronation of Elizabeth I, which is interesting given that the Doctor has already met Elizabeth I more than once and even married her.
Exactly. Yep. And not all that long ago. I mean, it was only the 10th Doctor, and it was the 5 years ago in the Day of the Doctor, and almost exactly 5 years ago, actually, when you think about it.
It was. It was.
Yeah, it was 50. It was the 55th anniversary passing. So they're trying to get to the coronation. At the end, the TARDIS. She makes an interesting remark at the beginning that the TARDIS is still acting up. So the TARDIS has been acting up all season, if you recall. And so the TARDIS is, and I wonder if this is a, I mean, I don't think, I'm not going to say it's an arc, but if this is leading up to something.
It could be. The very first thing the TARDIS did was abandon her and run away.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there could be, even though it's easily possible to dismiss this as just normal TARDIS acting up, which it did for years and years, and this is kind of a return to form for the show, it also could be they're building up to something.
Right.
By the way, speaking of building up to something, I saw a recent proposal. Forgive me, this is a little off topic, but I saw a recent proposal where someone was putting together some clues that indicate something may be up with the Doctor's health, because in a couple of recent episodes, the Doctor has had health scans. This occurred both in the Saranga Conundrum and in Kerblam. She's run through a body scanner in both cases. And in the first case, she turns to the Doctor. He looks at her scan and says, that doesn't make any sense. And she then confronts him later and says in the hallway and says, you saw something on my scan and it frightened you. And he says, no. And she says, bad liar. And that's what discusses or initiates the discussion of him being a bad liar. And then in Kerblam, the head of organics, runs her through the medical scanner, notices that she's got two hearts, which she immediately explains. One is like an implant. And then, even though she's turned off the medical scanner, the corporate official keeps going back to it and is like trying to call up her medical record again to look at it, even and would have if it wasn't for the fact they were then interrupted. And so it's another little thing that might be building is maybe something with the Doctor's health.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, and of course they were on that hospital ship in the first place because they were injured, and maybe it's a continuation of that.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's possible. Interesting. Yeah, something to keep an eye on as we the last few episodes of this building to something. So they get to this village, which they find out is named Bilehurst Crag, which is a great old name. Bilehurst. I mean, it just bears so much.
Every syllable of that is bad.
That sounds like a great, place to go visit. The Bahamas and Jamaica and Bilehurst Crag. And they just roll up.
Don't be a real estate agent.
Kind of place.
Yeah. Don't be a real estate agent. Bilehurst Crag. You'll never sell a thing. Anyway, which eventually doesn't matter because it's. We'll find out at the end that it's wiped from the map. But we encounter this woman, Mistress Savage, who is
obvious trait name.
You're right.
Yeah.
But it's a very odd. She seems to be like a lady of the manor, but is not addressed using an aristocratic title. So there's
she's apparently a commoner who married up.
Right. So she doesn't. Even though she maintains the manor and she inherits everything, she doesn't get a title or something. I guess I don't know. Maybe it's a nuance of the British aristocracy. I don't know about. But
by the way, I like the fact. So one of the things that we've noted in recent episodes is the degree of complexity that they do or don't build in to the villains. In Rosa, we had very flat, unimaginative, one-dimensional villains. In the more recent Demons of the Punjab, we got a much more complex and satisfying texturing of society with good and bad intermingled, and that continues here. And one of the things and I was kind of concerned about this episode because, knowing that it's going to deal with witch finding and witch hunts, in medieval Europe, or not medieval, but in older times in Europe, it would be very easy for this episode to just veer into Christian bashing.
Right.
And it didn't. And it also, although it did touch on gender issues in a way that I'm sure we'll comment on, and that I found very, very well done, it helps keep from coming across as too one-sided by having the lead witch hunter, especially initially, be a woman.
Right.
Because it would have, if that gender had been flipped, you would have the standard patriarchy oppressing women in the form of witches narrative. And by having the initial head witchfinder be a woman, you avoid that and give a more complex picture. Because the fact is, loads of women at the time were opposed to witches and thought that their community was dealing with witches.
Right. Okay. That's a good introduction to it. And we'll deal with the elements of what of the things coming up as we go along. I think that's a good way to begin. I might not have the same approach to some of the way they handled some of that you did too, but or the same assessment of how well they did it. But we'll talk about it, and I might change my mind. That's as I often do when I talk to you both. I sometimes, you know what, it was better than that, or that was much worse. But anyway, so let's get into it. The doctor says something right off the bat, which is, we're in this place, so don't interfere with it. She says, don't interfere with the fundamental fabric of history, even if something's not right.
Which she then immediately does.
Right, which is kind of funny because we know that the doctor has done that.
I was gonna say it's about the second or third time this season that she's made that kind of little speech, and not 5 minutes later has immediately broken it.
Yeah. And in fact, I think Graham actually remarks on it at the time, doesn't he?
Yeah. So that is something that kind of has to be there not necessarily in this episode, but it has to be there in some form or another on a regular basis to explain why the doctor is not constantly rewriting history.
Right.
But the doctor needs the freedom to make some changes, at least in individuals' lives. And so that explains the don't interfere with the fundamental fabric of history.
Right.
You can make changes around the edges, but don't try to do anything big. But then notice how she sets up that line. She tells the companions on trips into the past, don't interfere with the fundamental fabric of history. And that just struck me as odd because from the doctor's perspective, the past and the future are the same.
Right.
I guess I can rationalize that by saying, well, she's speaking from the companion's perspective.
But from her perspective, why does it matter? Like what the past, right. So yeah, it's a good point. So they get to this witch trial that Mr. Savage is having of this poor granny, Willa's granny here, and
who can't hold her breath for beans.
I'm sorry, but if you're going to be doing a witch trial, Monty Python is right at the top of my mind.
Oh yeah,
how do you know she's a witch?
That was so much the Monty Python. It's like if she floats, she's a witch.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this whole the dunking stool thing, this phenomenon, because this is one of the areas where they got it completely way off base. That this is not what was done. Okay, for one thing, a dunking stool was not used to dunk people until they were dead to prove they weren't witches. I mean, that doesn't even make any sense. If you drown, you're innocent. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and notice how righteous her community is. There have been 36 innocent people so far because they all drowned.
Right, exactly. So a dunking stool was a punishment intended for women for a variety of offenses. They were not meant to be fatal punishments, capital punishment. But things like, backbiting and angry words and being a gossip monger and things like that, where they would have dunking or even just sit in a chair like a nicer version of the stocks, sort of like to just expose them to the community.
Yeah, I was going to mention the stocks as another example of kind of public humiliation as punishment, which is common in lots of societies, that and other forms of corporal punishment. This kind of blends the humiliation with the corporal aspect because being dunked is physically uncomfortable. But even today, I mean, you go to Singapore, you commit certain crimes, and you'll get a caning.
Right.
Yep.
Now, my guess is they wanted a dunking stool because they needed this tree to be part of the story somehow. But what with the actual thing that happened during trials, sometimes, not every trial was witches were what they called it. Witches were swam, meaning their right thumb was tied to the big toe of their left foot. Don't ask me why that was that. I don't know the exact details. And then
everybody's sitting there going, "Okay, how do you do that?"
Yeah, basically, it's very makes it very awkward and uncomfortable. Then they were thrown into the water to see if they floated. If they didn't float, they weren't witches and were retrieved before drowning. This is the key thing. They were not drowned to prove their innocence. If they did float, well, they were pulled out of the water and hung as witches.
Because the water did not receive them, therefore they must be unwholesome.
Right. The waters of baptism have rejected their body, that sort of thing. So your best bet was to just, I suppose, endure it.
Blow all the air out of your lungs.
Go right to the bottom. Yeah. Again, Monty Python. What floats? Rocks.
Yeah.
Well, very
Churches.
small ones.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my wife and I were watching that. See, I lived in Salem, Mass for a decade. And so I
all know something about finding witches.
Yes, it's quite familiar to me. And there are other aspects of this that I want to bring up as well, but and we'll get into that. But the whole drowning the witch to prove her innocence, the thing that bothers me about it is it perpetuates this idea that people from the past were stupid and ignorant, and that they didn't that they would believe that you prove someone's innocence by killing them, which is not. I mean, it's such a post-Enlightenment chronological snobbery. I think we see this in a lot of other legends of history that were never true, and that just kind of bugged me that they kind of did it this way. That you could have done this another way that didn't make it. People of the past were stupid, sort of thing.
Well, anyway. And it's a lot of times when you have these situations where they make them sound stupid, the truth of what happened was actually far more compassionate than some people today are.
Exactly.
I mean, you hear. The biggest one I could think of was the Spanish Inquisition. I mean, that's kind of the big example. Again, speaking of Monty Python, but the church in the Spanish Inquisition was actually more compassionate and just than the civil authorities were, but yet the church gets the blame.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Things like that.
In fact, the Dominicans, being canon lawyers, it was like, okay, you say this person sacrificed a baby. Where's the corpse? Where's the evidence?
Right. Yeah. They would, right. If people had a choice, they chose the Church Inquisition over the Civil Inquisition every day.
In fact, we have records of people committing blasphemy in civil courts specifically so they could get their cases transferred to the church courts.
Right. So it's a bit of a tangent, but yes.
But I mean, it's that same idea, though.
It's the same idea, though. Right.
They wouldn't have the real trials were not good, but they also weren't this level of evil.
Right. And this is sort of over the top. So, the doctor tries to save the Willa's granny, and it doesn't. She like she barely can't hold her breath for more than 10 seconds, and she dies. And
in order to really kill somebody, you not only would you have them run out of breath, which would take at least 2 minutes, they'd need to be brain dead for at least 5 minutes.
Right, and the doctor would know that and be able to revive her. Yeah. The doctor confronts Mistress Savage and shows her the witch, the psychic paper, which on it says that she's the Witchfinder General,
which is a really great twist. I like that.
Yeah, that is going to be. I love that. As much as the psychic paper can be a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, all-purpose tool, like the Sonic can be. It can be a nice element of unexpected or a little bit of chaotic element in the story, because even the doctor doesn't know what it's going to say and has to kind of improvise with whatever it does, which we see again later.
Fun where she shows it and then, it does? Yes, of course it does. Looks at it, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. For people who are new to the show, the psychic paper is something the doctor shows people as a kind of identity card, and it shows the person whatever identity the doctor needs to have in this situation based on the understanding of the person looking at the psychic paper. So the doctors just come in here and asserted authority over witches. And so Miss Savage sees it as, oh, you're a Witchfinder General. But then when King James comes in later, he's too prejudiced against women, and so she gets a demotion to like a Witchfinder's assistant because he can't think of a woman as the Witchfinder general.
Right, exactly. And there are a few times where she's the doctor's encountered people who, for whatever reason, their insight is too great and the paper is just blank to them.
And well, one thing in the sonic paper is a new Who invention. We didn't see that paper until it started. Or psychic paper,
Yes.
Yeah. My favorite misfire with the psychic paper is in A Christmas Carol, where Matt Smith's crazy zany doctor is trying to pass himself off as a licensed, responsible adult babysitter. And the psychic paper just blows out and cannot present him as a responsible adult.
So we find out that, like we said, Mr. Savage is the landowner of Bilehurst Crag. And they bring up this weird tangent point. I'm not sure what the point was, like that. Why are you walking? Oh, because horses are creatures of Satan and have had them all killed. I'm not sure.
Really?
That seemed kind of random. Like,
sprinkled them with holy water.
Yeah.
Looking back at the episode, though, I think it kind of gave the first subtle hint of that there was more to Mistress Savage than it appears.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe she can't ride the horse because the horses
know who she was.
Right. Horses are spooked by the other presence within her. Possible.
Right. Spoilers at the end, but
yeah. Well, I mean, we assume everyone has watched the episode.
I know.
So
I know.
Graham brings up something which I had to then look up, which is he goes, "I've done the Pendle Witch Walking Trail, the Pendle Hill Witch Walking Trail, and Bilehurst Crag wasn't on it." And so I looked it up, and so the trials of the Pendle witches in 1612 are among the most famous witch trials in English history, and some of the best recorded of the 17th century. So that's right in this time period. There was a witchcraft hysteria that they're in. And in fact, there were 12 people in that area who were accused of being witches in this Lancashire Pendle Hill area, and were charged with the murders of 10 people by the use of witchcraft. Now, so that's the real world historical context. And in this, 35 people in this little town have been killed as witches by Mistress Savage, as we know by the end, is doing this to cover up her own issues. I mean, it's just makes it horrific.
Yeah, although we get and we'll talk about this as we get further into the episode, but it's not just, she's not being completely manipulative here. She does believe there are witches. She's just trying to cover up the fact that she's also been infected, but she does think there's a real threat here that she's dealing with. Okay.
So you're right. There is she's witch finding not just as a cover up, but because she's trying to atone. So I think, like you say, for being possessed.
Well, and she's sincere in being completely wrong, but she is sincere in it. It's not just malicious.
Right. Okay, that's a good point. So
speaking of sincerity, we get a nice bit of exchange back in the manor where Mistress Savage, or Becca, as I believe her first name is, quotes from Deuteronomy in the King James version of the Bible, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," which means you shall not allow a witch to live. And this is kind of a mistranslation, because in Hebrew it isn't a witch, it's a consulter of the dead, a necromancer. But it is how it got translated in the King James Bible, and she mentions that, as King James said in his recent Bible. So that tells us this is after 1611.
Yes.
Or at least after the release of the Old Testament, which I think was the 1611 edition. I think the New Testament was released earlier. Also, he wasn't the personal translator of it.
That's an important point.
He authorized it.
He authorized it for use in the churches. But it does bring up a point that, this text is one that Christians in England were dealing with at this time. It is right there in the Bible. "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," in the translation they're looking at. And what do you do with that? It's understandable if people's holy text says something like this, they're likely to take it seriously and try to implement it. Now, the doctor then points out, there's a twist in the sequel, meaning the New Testament, "Love thy neighbor." And indeed, there is a different approach taken to a bunch of issues in the New Testament compared to the Old Testament. The Old Testament was dealing at with a different stage in God's revelation, with a different culture that was locked into one, area. They were trying to run the nation, a nation, whereas Christianity is international. Christianity is not burdened with running a nation and defending it the way that Old Testament Israel was. And so there are some notable differences, and we're also dealing with a later stage of revelation in the New Testament that involves a fuller revelation of God's will. But because there's that balance of, what do we do with this older revelation? How do we square it with the newer revelation? You're going to get different approaches by different people. And so some people in sincerity would say, well, the way to harmonize these is loving your neighbor by not allowing a witch to live.
Yeah.
Because that's the loving thing. Others would say, no, it means something else.
There is this whole mention of the King James's Bible, also known as the Authorized Version, which that fact that he authorized it, is
in the Church of England. This is, by the way, not a Catholic translation.
Yes, very, very good distinction. It's all sort of a bit of a precursor to what's about to happen, which is this fellow has been lurking about in a mask and then shows up in the manor and reveals himself to be King James, who apparently travels alone or with his protector, but without the court, hunting witches, which actually... turns out, King James did write a book called Demonology, which the doctor finds on Becca's nightstand, and he was obsessed with the hunting of witches. So that is actually, that part is actually historical. I don't think he actually snuck about his kingdom personally hunting them down. I think that's...
He was involved in in hunting witches at one point, but apparently that was before he actually became king.
Right.
And by this point in his life story, he'd actually become more skeptical of claims about witches.
Right.
And so he was not the witch obsessed person at this point in his reign, or at this point in his life, that he had been earlier. So that's a little non-historical.
Yeah. And I did like the way this actor played the role. I don't know. There's something about it was quite funny. I just felt like he was amusing, but I also liked the fact how for some reason he really became like enamored of Ryan. And
you know what they're doing there, right?
What's that?
Oh, well, so the King James, according to various sources, preferred the company of handsome young men. And it has been argued that he was either gay or bisexual, but it's also not clear that that's the case. And so it's somewhat ambiguous. And that's why in this episode, they have him behave this way towards Ryan, and also have references to drama and actors and act a little fabulous, but without coming across and clearly establishing that he's gay or bi or something. So this is them reflecting the ambiguity that exists around the memory of King James.
Well, because he was married to a woman and did have
kids.
Children. So, I mean, there had to be something there, but again,
yes, without getting too many details. But I did find like Ryan like being uncomfortable with it, the attention, but also sort of ended up like finding a way to use that attention to redirect the king. I did kind of like that bit of it. I feel like Ryan had more of a role than he's had apart from dealing with his absent dad or his physical issues. I like that it sort of developed Ryan's character a little more.
I did like Ryan's look when the king called him Nubian Prince. He just kind of like, what?
that was good. Some more of that over the top ridiculousness. This whole
at least King James didn't think Yaz was a Mexican.
right.
Exactly.
We were saved from that. Only Southerners would do that. So, but the king has the over-the-top statement, "We shall save the souls of all my people, even if it means killing them all." And I'm just like, oh, that's just so over-the-top ridiculous. Like, people, that's not really how people would be about. I mean, it's so hyperbolic.
Killing them all is the problem.
Right.
Yeah. That's going past zeal into, megalomania.
Right. It just doesn't make it. Yeah. It's just not. I don't know. It seems too much. Anyway, the doctor flat out says she doesn't believe in Satan, despite the fact that she ran into him. Once.
She says not a big believer in Satan. And that is a problem, given that she's like faced off with the devil, at least twice, and really, and more than that now that Scratchman is coming out.
Right.
So that line I needed revision.
Yes. Then we have Willa's grandmother, who is the potion lady of the village, who apparently imparted the wisdom. There's enough wonder in nature without making things up, which I guess meant she was a 17th century peasant atheist. Was that a thing? I
don't know what she was.
Yeah, I just felt like that was
kind of the religion versus science vibe kind of going there. Where
right.
What I wondered, because they initially show Willa doing this ritual, over her grandmother's grave, and it's infused with nature imagery in the words that she's saying. I thought this was going to be like, okay, these guys are crypto pagans; they really are witches,
right?
Or at least pagans, and it didn't turn out to be that way, which I'm glad it didn't. But I think that was largely misdirection on the part of the writer. There's a number of layers of misdirection in this, including the idea that the whole village is going to be wiped out, because after Graham says this isn't on the walking list, we then get multiple indications that, we're going to maybe kill everybody here. And it turns out they don't do that, but that's part of the misdirection.
Right. So what we get are aliens in the mud, which it turns out to be.
Yeah.
And we'll find out about the Morax later on, but they manifest themselves as mud tentacles that first try to take Willa, but then when they don't succeed, they take over the bodies of the dead and reanimate them. So we have mud alien zombies.
And the mud zombies are really creepy.
Yeah,
I thought they were effectively creepy.
Yes, mud alien zombie witches. And now we get what we've kind of expected to see, that would come up more often, or at least it would happen sometime this season. The doctor goes off on, if I were a guy, in reaction to King James saying, you couldn't possibly be the Witchfinder general, you must be the Witchfinder assistant. She kind of goes off on this whole, if I were a guy, this wouldn't happen thing.
If I were still a guy.
If I were still a guy,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so we knew this was coming. I mean, before Jodie Whittaker's first season even aired, I think we talked about it before. How is the doctor being a woman, how is she going to deal with historical situations where women did not have the kind of social role that women do now? And we always knew that was going to be an issue. This is the first time we've really confronted it. It may have come up in small ways before, but this is the first time it's been put squarely on the table. And I thought they handled it okay. Yeah. The doctor adapts to the situation she's in. She's not happy about it, but she adapts because she realizes, I'm not going to be able to claim the chief witchfinder role from King James. He's not going to support me in that. So I just need to deal and get on with business. And she does. She complains about it a little bit. She talks about being patronized to death as a woman in this age. But fundamentally, she doesn't get in King James's face and make a big feminist speech, which is not what would be helpful to the people she's trying to save in this situation. And so I thought I thought this was reasonable. I thought, if I were in another time or, on another planet where my gender was not allowed to do a role that I previously was accustomed to doing, I would have to say, okay, I'm gonna deal with this. I'm not gonna try to fight a whole culture or make a big stink if I have a task I need to perform here.
And we'll talk more about that when we talk about Star Trek: The Next Generation's Angel One in Secrets of Star Trek. Go ahead, Father Corey.
But it's interesting though. You compare how King James treated the Doctor, obviously appearing as a younger woman, and Becca Savage,
right,
who was a little more mature.
Mm-hmm.
At least it was because he treated her with much more respect,
right,
than he did the Doctor.
That's true.
And maybe part of that was just because the Doctor, being the Doctor, kind of took more authority than he was willing to give her.
Right.
She already looked, probably to him clownish in her modern clothes, and
she looks clownish to a lot of moderns in these clothes.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of Mork for Mork thing going on there. We probably talked about that before. At some point, obviously, we knew the Doctor would eventually be accused of witchcraft, given she carries around a wand and she does
and I'm
impossible
so glad
things.
that they pointed out, because the sonic screwdriver dramatically in its plot function is a magic wand.
Yeah. Yes.
And to have that explicitly pointed out, they totally needed to do that, and I'm so glad they did.
So the king, they keep calling him King James as if like he's like LeBron James. Like they use that as a moniker as opposed to title and name. Like you wouldn't refer like, hey, King James, you'd say Your Highness or something like that. But
yeah,
so
Your
the
Majesty.
king, yeah, the king, at one point says in relation to her name, the Doctor, you're Dr. D, the necromancer.
Oh,
what is that?
Okay, so John Dee was a necromancer. He was an occultist who was also an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I.
Okay.
And this was just, I thought this was a bad point in the dialogue, because Willa says that the Doctor hasn't told us her name. She's just the Doctor. And King James has this amazing leap, like Dr. D, the necromancer. And it's like, I'm sorry, you're going to know lots of people called Doctor. You're not immediately going to think of John D.
Right. It's almost like the screenwriter's pulling out all the bits of his research and throwing it into the script.
Her.
Yes. Yes. I'm sorry. Her. She. We have this interesting moment where Willa does, out of fear, turn on the Doctor and the companions, and it comes back later as the Doctor kind of mentions it, but it goes by quick. But I think it's an important point, which is it illustrates the effect of witchcraft hysteria, which is people, once you start accusing someone of witchcraft or whatever, other people who are afraid of being falsely accused themselves are likely to want to point the finger somewhere else, to change the focus. Not me. How about them? Go after that guy over there. And it creates this, and that's what creates the hysteria is the fear that it creates in people, and the desire to implicate someone else in whatever it is that's being accused of. And I thought that was a really for this script a subtle point to make in the story.
Well, it's kind of a parallel of what Becca is doing herself, where she's covering for what's happening to her by pointing at everybody else.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite analogous to, like I mentioned, I lived in Salem for 10 years, and I became somewhat familiar with the cases there. And it reminds me of that, what Becca did is very similar in some ways to what happened in Salem, which is I keep using the preposition which, but I don't want it to be confusing. But in Salem, what happened was a young woman accused an older Irish woman of witchcraft, of using a spell on her, when she got caught doing something she shouldn't have been doing. And she said, "Oh, I was bewitched by so and so." She mumbles in a ancient language and is casting spells on me. Well, it turns out this poor Irish woman was saying her prayers in Latin. She was a Catholic, and that's why she was accused of witchcraft. Horrible
Catholics who, we bewitch people by speaking that foreign tongue.
Right. Good wife
saying the Our Father.
Yeah, exactly. And then once that happened, they said, well, who else is a witch? And then they started looking around, and then they started pointing the fingers, and then other people got accused. And hey, if you want to get rid of somebody, a witchcraft hysteria is a nice way to get rid of someone for something completely unrelated. And then it just
you hear stories of that happening where someone crosses another person. Oh, it must be a witch.
Right. And Jimmy, you mentioned I thought we would eventually get to finding out that somebody's a Wiccan or pagan, or Wiccans are a modern invention, but like a pagan of some sort, and we'd get all into that, which we didn't.
Yeah.
But it was
and that's good, because in the, despite some claims of some neo-pagans,
right,
there were not pagans in England at this time. What there were, and I think that's ultimately what Willa and her grandmother were people who practiced folk magic. They would be people who were Christian in their faith, but they had folk magic practices that they would do for healing and things like that.
Right.
Well, and honestly, I mean, let's be honest. That sort of thing still happens in many places, around, that there are right. Christians who effectively practice a sort of superstitious folk magic related to, burying a statue upside down in your yard to sell your house is a kind of folk magic.
Yeah.
That's
and like here in California, we have I'm blanking on the term for them in Spanish, but there are these shops that sell folk magic herbs,
right?
For people to use. And you'll see. And I'm not talking about pot. Yeah, those are other shops.
Yes.
But you'll see certain places where they'll take Christian images like the saints and religious objects and things like that, but it is more of a paganistic type of religion. Right. You see some of that too in some places,
which then gets condemned by the church with things like Santa Muerte.
Yes.
Right.
Saint Death.
Right.
Or Holy Death.
From Santeria or Voodoo. And in Salem today, you have actually a lot of people who are Wiccans, practicing Wiccans, who claim to be, the spiritual descendants of the original witches, which I think is not correct. I mean, it does them, those poor innocents of the past, disservice to lump them in. But one of the things I want to point out, and I think it's sort of a public service message, is witchcraft is not something to mess with. The doctor sort of dismisses it as just hysteria, but that Satan could be acting as hysteria. But one of the things, that's something that's important to put as, you don't want to mess with, and in fact the church teaches, don't mess with the occult, don't mess with spells. One of the co-parishioners at the church I went to, the Catholic church I went to in Salem, was a former witch. She had been a witch and had left that life and repented of it. And she said, she didn't get into details, but she said she saw and did things that would curl your hair and, make your hair fall out. I mean, it would really scare you, because there is a malevolent spiritual being called the devil who hates us.
Yeah.
And it's active. And so, don't mess with it. There is something out there. Now, I'm not saying we need to kill witches. That's a stupid thing, but that I just want to kind of mention that here at this point as opportune moment.
Well, it's something that you should not even open the door to. People kind of laugh about, like the Ouija board. Oh, that's just a game. No, it's not. It really isn't.
Which used to be made in Salem, by the way. There was a Parker Brothers plant in Salem. Yeah.
That's funny. But there's all that kind of stuff, tarot cards being used to tell the future and stuff like that. That's all gateways to get into this stuff, to get into this danger.
So to pull back to the episode,
yes,
I wanted to comment on the fact that I really like that we get scenes of where we're explicitly invited to be sympathetic both for King James and for Becca Savage.
Yes.
We get the nice scene where Ryan asks King James about why is he so mistrustful of people, and he lays out his life history, and it's like, wow, that really would lead you to be mistrustful of people, and you get a sense I'm sorry, except it gets the history wrong, but I'll let you finish your thought. Sorry. A bit, but on the dramatic level,
yes.
This is giving us sympathy for a guy who they could have portrayed as just a flat villain.
Yes.
Right. And we get the same thing for Becca Savage. She talks about how terrified she is and how she's been trying to resist this thing. And yeah, she's done things she shouldn't have in that, including at least one deliberate murder, because because the healer she turned to knew that she was infected, and she says that's why she killed her. But she's genuinely terrified. She's also not a flat villain. And when the mud finally takes her over, it's like, wow, that's horrifying.
Right.
So I like the fact we got sympathy, and that they made these characters significantly more two-dimensional than they otherwise could have.
The point I was going to make about the King James's backstory is, he's mad because he's mistrustful of his mother because she abandoned him. She didn't exactly abandon him. His mother was Mary, Queen of Scots. She was forced to abdicate and made to leave, but for political purposes. She didn't abandon him. She also didn't kill his father. His father died from an explosion, not from beheading, but there was an explosion, and at the time they thought he was strangled. But modern forensics points out that the symptoms or the evidence on the body after an explosion can often look like strangulation.
Yeah, but not that we could expect people in King James's day to understand that.
But he wasn't killed by his mother, and he wasn't beheaded. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure why. The thing is, I'm not sure why the writer wanted to say this ahistorical little bit about King James. It seemed odd to change the history. I mean,
could have just been bad research.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, you can make it a sympathetic figure.
Lots of people get Mary, Queen of Scots, and Mary Tudor confused.
Right. So we have. Well, that's true. That's a good point. Although maybe less so in the BBC's home territory, but maybe so, because
you'd hope not, but
right. So in the moment when the doctor is she's tied up waiting to be tortured as a witch, that she's confronted by King James, and she goes through this whole thing with him about if you want to know the mysteries of the universe, then start with the secrets of the heart, which I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that. It seems like it's supposed to be deep, but is it really?
Yeah, this is one of those anger leads to hate, hate leads to fear, fear leads to something else.
Suffering.
Things. It's not really as profound as it's meant to be.
I was expecting either to have, come to the dark side, or or the theme song from Star Trek Enterprise to start up.
Yeah, some of the speechifying in this episode was a little rote.
Yes.
I did like, though, some of the dialogue I thought was very well done. Like in this sequence, at one point, the doctor accuses King James of hiding behind a title, namely the word king.
Right.
And he totally throws that back at her. Oh, yes. Like you with the title doctor. And
that was a good one.
Oh, score one for King James. That was good.
What was the Latin phrase that was on his boot or something like that? You would happen to remember that?
Yeah. Oh, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was to the effect of this is a paraphrase. This is a very loose paraphrase, but it was something to the effect of, to the pure, all things are pure.
Okay. So we finally get to this resolution. We build up to this resolution. The mud zombie alien witches have shambled their way to the doctor's dunking and confront Becca, and we have this.
Turns out they're a race called the Morax,
right?
And they've been imprisoned under this hill for war crimes they apparently committed off planet.
Yeah,
and apparently, from what the doctor says, they've been here for billions of years, and the tree that Becca chopped down and that is now the dunking stool was what was keeping them trapped.
So this is where the episode really went off track for me. This whole from here to the end. So first, I'm to believe that the lady of the manor went out. There was a tree that was ruining her view, so she went out herself, herself, to cut down the tree. Servants do it, right? I'm not sure. How are we supposed to believe that?
It wasn't like this was a little sapling or a couple-year-old tree. That was a easily 10, 12 foot wide tree.
Yes.
And she had a little hand axe.
But it was wide.
Diameter might have been 10 foot, but certainly it was about 4 feet across or something. I mean, it was a big tree.
But she had a little hand axe.
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
And then we have yet another alien imprisoned somewhere on Earth. We have a dragon in the moon, spider people in the middle of the planet, and now we have the Morax and Pendle. I mean, I'm sure there are others from the history of Doctor Who.
We've got the Silurians, down in their tunnels that repeatedly. Yeah, there's lots of things trapped on Earth.
I mean, at least
we're basically Takron Galtos. We're a prison planet.
So the Silurians actually, at least originated here. But I just feel like it's such an unoriginal idea. I mean, it's so done. I mean, I know 55 years. You have to recycle some things, but I don't know.
So is Alien Invasion. At least they're trying to not have us being freshly invaded.
I guess. But like, who put them there? Why here? I don't know. I'm sitting there going, well, where did these guys come from? It was weird. I don't know. So somebody buried this army in a hill instead of killing them, and the tree is alien tech, and apparently burning the alien tech makes anti-Morax smoke.
It's like if you have if you go to a modern prison and you take one of the prison doors and break it apart and set fire to it, it'll poison the prisoners. Sure.
Sure. Or
it probably would, but
it's like the magic smoke inside your computer. If you pour water on it and smoke comes out, you've released the magic smoke that lets the computer work.
What I hated even more is once they they re-energize the security thing, the tree's roots now, it's stumping its roots. And that doesn't just block the Morax King from coming out and presumably other Morax soldiers down there. It also sucks back into the ground every cell from the zombies who have been infected.
Right.
And it's like this is all just too tidy. This is a bad execution of a central failure point resolution.
Right. Well, and so I've chopped my MacBook in half, and so now I've plugged it back in, the remaining half of it, plugged it back in, and now it runs again. Like, no, like how is that doesn't make any sense that you've got like this half a tree alien thing key, but then we have this very strange moment where the Doctor is trying to save Becca, where and suddenly here comes King James out of nowhere with the axe and slams it into
the torch.
Right. I'm sorry, the torch. That's right. And blows her up, and that's that. And I'm like, that's that?
Yeah.
That's really going to be the resolution?
I know. What happened to the body? Why isn't there at least the human body here?
Because it blew up.
Yeah, I know. Oh. Blew into to a million bits and pieces, I guess. But I don't know. That seemed like a very strange resolution. Like, why couldn't she be saved? And what was, I don't know.
Well, it's so that the reason on the writing level is it gives the Doctor an excuse to be displeased with King James at the end.
Right.
Right. I suppose. And as she's going off, she utters the immortal Arthur C. Clarke line of any sufficiently advanced technologies indistinguishable from magic.
Yep.
That was clearly Arthur Clarke reference. And off she goes into the TARDIS with everyone else. Ryan does have a nice goodbye with the king. Gives him back his little dad
pendant thing. Yeah,
pendant thing. So as you can tell, I don't think this was in the top half of the episodes of this season. I had too many problems, especially with the resolution. But you guys, might have had a different opinion. Any final thoughts on this, Jimmy?
I didn't think that it was. Certainly, it was no kerblam.
Yes.
It was. I was relieved it was not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
It did have flaws, and I will probably like it less over time the more I think about the historical errors in it, because I'm of the view that if you're going to represent the past to people who don't know about the past, you need to represent it correctly.
Right.
If you're going to deviate from what actually happened in history, it needs to be obvious. Otherwise, you're misinforming people about the past. And so that will interfere with my thought about it, I suspect, more over time. Having said that, I thought it was a tightly paced episode. I thought it moved along nicely. I thought much of it worked. I liked as I mentioned, the Doctor's ability to work with the historical period in which she finds herself. I thought individual lines of dialogue were very good. I like that the doctor at one point is talking, well, metaphorically, oh, I can't buy that, meaning I can't accept that. And King James turns to Mistress Becca and says, why does the lassie speak of commerce?
Yeah.
And I thought that was nice. There's a line that Yaz had that I think was meant to be funny, but the way the director shot it, it didn't come off that way. At one point, King James is referring to the zombies as witches, and Yaz says, seriously, not witches, bodies possessed by alien mud. as if that's any more credible.
Right, exactly.
And she didn't say it the way I just did, which would have brought out the humor. Or tried to anyway.
She just kind of said it matter of factly, like, yeah, really, no, this you're completely missing it.
Yeah.
There's also some lines that I don't like. There's one point where the doctor is talking about King James stirring up hate, and that's just too modern a way to characterize it. There's also a line where Willa comes in towards the end and has this totally cliche line about there's more powerful people here than kings and queens. There's us. And yeah, come on, also, little minor note, we have a misfire of Chekhov's pricker in this episode because we have these two pricker devices introduced that if supposedly you prick a witch on their mark and it won't bleed. So obviously they're setting us up for something with that. Maybe the doctor, because the doctor doesn't have a heart in the normal place. But there's that clearly we're being set. We not actually have two prickers that were shown that are being wielded by Mr. Savage and King James. Neither one of them plays a role in the plot.
Right. That is true. That is a misfire. One other thing that came up, and I forgot to mention this, was when Willa and the doctor and Yaz are chatting in their in Willa's cottage. There's this strange conversation. I didn't get it, the point of it, where Willa talks about being sad and Yaz talks about, oh, I was sad for a while too, and how did you cure yourself? And it was, I didn't, and it was just this. Were they talking about depression? I mean, there was this, but it was
depression and bullying, and
because Willa says she feels really bad, and the doctor does a medical scan and says there's nothing medically wrong with you, and Yaz figures out you're afraid and depressed because of what's been going on.
Okay, It just seemed sort of an odd, like we've thrown that in there, but then do nothing with that.
I think it's meant to be character development and give us emotional insight on Willa and the psychological dynamic of the situation, but I think it doesn't work that well.
Yeah. It's sufficiently developed. Father Corey, did you have any last thoughts on this?
I will say I'm kind of like with Jimmy. I did enjoy the episode more or less. It was kind of a different one, though. It was funny. My folks were here visiting for Thanksgiving, and my dad and I watched this episode last night. This is the first episode of the new Doctor that he's gotten to see. And so it was kind of a strange introduction to Doctor number 13. But it was, he kind of shook his head.
That's good. Okay, so let's get some. We've had some listener feedback on our episode about Kerblam last time. On Facebook, Joyce Militech says, I like the episode, but I don't like that the Doctor's still acting like she was just regenerated. By now, she should have all her past memories and quickness. Do you get the sense that she's still in regeneration madness and doesn't have...
I got the sense that Peter Capaldi was for like a season or more, but I think my impression is the Doctor has settled in pretty well. She's having trouble with the TARDIS,
right?
But I think that's because the TARDIS has changed, not because she doesn't have her memories.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Where it's not, and maybe it's part of the fact that she does kind of play the I don't know card a lot more than we're used to.
Okay.
Which is a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, but that's you go back again to classic Who, and you see that a lot where the Doctor encounters something. It's like, I don't know anything about this. Let's figure it out.
Right. Whereas too often the Doctor knows every single, like in this episode, knew exactly who the Morhex were or something like that. Just in the past, it's been the Doctor doesn't know, and doesn't know everything about everything in the universe.
Also, by the way, note in this episode how we repeatedly hit this is a very flat organizational structure with her and the companions.
Right, that's true. Right, that was a fun little modern lingo. Steph Lutz says, after Kerblam, I feel better about Amazon coming to Queens.
Oh yeah, there's headquarters
right
moving
now.
there. Yeah.
Yes, they have their new second headquarters there. Kelly Brown writes, I was pleasantly surprised by Kerblam and the resolution of the plot. I was expecting a sermon against the evils of big business, but that's not what we got. This was actually the first episode of this season of Doctor Who that I want to watch again. It felt like Doctor Who, not just every other nondescript sci-fi series. I hope the show continues to improve. Well, we'll get your impression of whether you thought it continued to improve with this week's episode.
Yeah,
Let us know. Yeah. Les Hammer asks an important practical question. How do they keep the bubble wrap from exploding at the factory? An important practical question that needs to be answered. Eric Nanaman says, so far, this is my favorite episode. However, the question I was asking myself is that, didn't the Doctor know that Charlie was down among the delivery bots when she set them to destroy themselves? Couldn't she have just canceled the deliveries without having them pop the bubble wrap? It seems like there's a degree of culpability here. Her brisk warning, last warning, come back here, seems to be in discord with her empathy for the already dying spider from 3 episodes ago.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. What she's trying to do is not only keep the Kerblam robots from going out, so she has them teleport back to their exact locations. She then destroys the munitions so they can't be used in the future. And she needs to do both of those things, but she could have said, okay, wait, stop the destruction of the munitions. Let's haul Charlie out of there.
Right.
Yeah. And she didn't do that.
Right. So that was the feedback. Thank you, everyone, for that feedback. We'll give you all the ways you can give us the feedback in a moment. But while we're talking about Kerblam, I want to encourage everyone that when you're doing your Christmas shopping to go to smile.kerblam.com. I'm sorry. Please when you do your Christmas shopping, please go to smile.amazon.com and select SQPN as your nonprofit or charity of choice. You can also make this simple by going to sqpn.com and clicking on either the smile.amazon.com ad link, or there's another one for a browser extension, so that whenever you go to Amazon, it automatically makes sure that you're doing so through the Smile system. What that is Amazon has a way of designating a portion of all of your purchases to go toward a designated charity. It doesn't cost you anything extra. It just means that we get a little bit from Amazon. It's their do-gooder thing. So if you could do that, that would, if I have to be honest, a large portion, a sizable portion of our annual income at SQPN comes from the Amazon purchases that you make. And you all have been very good about this in the past, and I want to encourage you to continue to do so. And I appreciate
also, don't forget Giving Tuesday and our ongoing campaign. Please go to sqpn.com/give. Now that we're at the end of the podcast, this would be a great time to do that while you're still thinking about it.
Thank you very much. So that's it from us. So let us know what you thought of the Witchfinders. You can do that by going to sqpn.com or to the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page and leave feedback on the episode link there, or send an email to doctorwho@sqpn.com. You can find links to our personal social media and websites on our show notes on sqpn.com, and we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode, It Takes You Away, and apparently not Calgon. Until then, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
And thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, love thy neighbor.
Right. This is going to be fun.
This is Dom Bettinelli again. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast and that you'll help us keep producing the podcast you love. Thank you for your generosity. To make your pledge and find out about the free thank you gifts we'd like to send you, visit sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give.